Welcome to On Her Way, a podcast about grief and loss. Beryl Botman is my name. Good day. Telling stories is not only one of the ways to shine a light on our lives, it's living our lives, sharing our lives. In Without You and Sedert, skei, the first book, and Still Love Remains, Steeds, liefde, I told part of my story. The story of my grief and loss. I wish to give you a glimpse of the process I followed. I started one writing project that eventually resulted into 2 books. Writing is taking deliberate decision on the medium of how you want to tell your story, and I chose writing. Writing starts with that decision and is followed by many other decisions and full commitment and dedication. It starts with a passion for expression, for reading, for writing, for language. Passion, power. You have power. Language is power. And in order to share one's story, one's ideas, one communicates, and that gives power to you communicating, but it also gives power to the reader. The power to choose what to read, the power to choose what to believe, the power to choose to agree or disagree, the power to choose to appreciate or not to appreciate. The next important aspect of writing is perseverance. It is a long process. It's not a week or a day, depending on the kind of writing that you do. In my case, I was writing a book a non-fiction book that is a narrative, a storytelling of a certain aspect of my life. So it is a story, but it is also a non-fiction. So it had to be based on fact and my perspective and my impressions and my experience. And of course, when I write, I have to have a purpose. I must know what I am writing, why I am writing, why I think it is valuable, the story that I want to share. And I call these the 4 P's: passion, power, perseverance, and purpose. And apart from the 4 P's, there are some other aspects that are also important for writing. Yes, apart from the 4 P's, it is important that you have a love for language expression and for being in relation to language with others and also expressing yourself. And of course, writing is a skill. It's a language skill. So there are skills that is important. Skills and knowledge are important if you want to write. And there must be some percentage of talent if one chooses to write. So I believed I had all of these prerequisites to some degree, and that is how I chose to express myself. Added to that, I also realized that inspiration is very important. Inspiration from outside, encouragement and support. Writing doesn't just happen from within oneself. It's not just an individual activity. I had to take into cognizance the support and the inspiration that I received from outside. So it's not only a one-person activity because of that communication and community that writing is a part of. So I've never written a book before, and I knew that. I've written all kinds of other things, which I've learned to do, which I went and studied, but I've never written a book. I've taught many novels and poetry, etc. in Afrikaans, but I knew I'd never written a book, so I knew that I had to go and learn how to do that. And I think it is a very important point that I'm sharing with you, that whatever one does, especially if it's a new skill, if it's a new experience, do yourself the favor and go and learn. Do some kind of a workshop, join a group of writers, go to a retreat, attend a weekend. There are many offers out in the world, on the internet. Choose what you prefer. Choose what you think you can afford. Choose what you think you can find meaning of. And go and attend some writer's workshop or retreat. That is what I set out to do. I had some ideas, and it is initially quite important or quite helpful to put those ideas out to others for their input in order for you to develop those ideas. My joining a writer's retreat was right at the beginning of my writing process. I had these ideas and I had to make several decisions about developing the idea of the story that I wanted to tell. There are many decisions to be made. One of the important ones for me was, what distinguishing factor am I going to present in my book? How is my story and the way I tell my story going to distinguish itself from any other story that I have ever written or ever read? And that is not easy, and it's not something completely new, but it just has to have an edge of something different. And so I have made several decisions in line with this distinguishing factor which I had to present in my book. The first one is the point of view. Who is telling the story? From which point of view is the story being told? Now, I have read and heard that if ever you embark on a first writing project of this magnitude, then the best way to approach it is to write truly and closely to yourself. And so, since this is part of my story, that is what I chose to do. I am the person that knows myself the best, and I know most about myself than I do of anybody else. So I chose to do the project with the point of view of myself. It's my point of view, and that is how I will tell the story. I had to consider setting. Where are the places that I am going to set the action that is happening within the story that I tell? What dialogue am I going to include? With who am I going to speak through the words? And I made those decisions. Initially, I intended to write one book. It was one writing project. So my initial decision was that it will be a one-way conversation. I will speak to my late husband, Russell Botman, and tell him what happened to me after he has passed away. And in that, I planned the plot of the story, of the many different incidents, because the plot helps one to not only tell the story, but also to hold the reader's attention. And in order to hold the reader's attention, you have to tell the story in such a way that the reader is motivated to continue reading, to find out more things, and not just, I did this and I did that and I went here and I went there. But you have to draw the reader in to your story in order to get the reader to continue throughout the whole story. Another decision that one needs to make when writing a story is the tense in which you write. Am I going to write past tense? Am I writing present tense? And those are decisions that are important because it must make sense to the reader. Why are you choosing to write in the present tense? And in my case, I decided to write in the present tense because I felt I'm telling the story about what is happening to me now, So I use the present tense. It's not a general way in which people tell stories, especially when you're writing. I think there's a greater leaning towards writing in the past tense because, in fact, the story did happen in the past. But anyway, that was a decision that I have made. So I've already said to whom I addressed the story. In this case, it was my late husband, Russell. Also, when writing, one needs to bear in mind who the audience is. Who is going to read the story? Who do you want to read the story? So you must have an idea of the kind of person. Is it a woman? How old is this woman? What would be her life experience? And all of those issues are important because when telling the story, you address that story on that level to the best of your knowledge, how such a person will respond to what you are telling her or him. And so, as you can gather, it's quite a lot of aspects that you have to incorporate into your storytelling. And that is why I used my writer's retreat to explore all of these issues in order to write in such a way that I address and incorporate these decisions that I have made. And in planning and in thinking of the other aspects of storytelling and of writing, story writing, another aspect is themes. You have to decide that X, Y, and Z is going to be the themes that I'm going to write about, and I'm not going to write about the other things. I have to choose. These are the things that I want to explore. And along with that, it is literary, if you write stories, to make use of symbolism. So it doesn't only help with meaning, but it also gives you an edge to the understanding of who the storyteller is, who the voice is that's coming out at you through pages. And those are also choices that you have to make. And they have to be real. They don't have to be made up. And it must become part of the story. It must be part of the story. Another aspect that needs some thought is the time envelope. In what envelope are you going to put your story? I am not able to write a story about my entire life in one book. I simply have too much to say. But decide on the time envelope. Now, initially, as I said, I planned one writing project, and the time envelope was 5 years. 5 years after Russell passed. So I am not going to write about before he died. I'm not going to write about the 6th year. I'm only going to concentrate on the 5 years. And that was my time envelope. And another important aspect is deciding on the structure. Now, if you're telling a story, it must have a structure. It must have a beginning that is logical, that draws the reader in, and then it has the development of what happens in the beginning into the middle of the story, and it must have an ending, a conclusion. But between the beginning and the end, there must be a structure that can be followed and can be repetitive in order for the reader to be able to identify and say, this is the cycle that this author is taking you on in telling the story. And so you have chapters. I decided not to name the chapters, chapter 1 and chapter 2. I have structured, I'm not going to speak too much about the details of the book, but I have structured the project into 4 sections, 4 parts. First part was daily accounts, second part was weekly accounts, and the third part was monthly accounts, and the last part, yearly accounts. And so after having decided on the structure, the extended plot had to be planned. So what more do I add to what I already decided what is going to happen in the story? Of course, in telling the story, it is very helpful and necessary to draw on sources that you have, cards and books and newspaper clippings and whatever you have, in order to help, not only help with your memory, but also to be able to substantiate what you are saying, that you are not just sucking facts out of your thumb, that you are basing it on sources and how you structure those sources, how to organize them. And then comes the detailed chapter planning. Every single chapter, what are the things that I will be including, and then each chapter has a whole long A4 page of issues and happenings and memories that you just list, not necessarily organize yet, but just make a brainstorm about what you want to include in each of these chapters. Now, remember, writing a book is not writing a story. It's not a short story. And the books that we see on the shelves in the library or in bookshops consist of many, many words. So you must have much to say in order to write a book. In the workshop that I attended, the recommendation was to write between 80 and 90,000 words. Now, 80 and 90,000 words are a lot of words. And one of the reasons why I chose the period, the 5-year period, apart from it being what I identified as the most important period regarding my grief and loss process, and after the 5-year period, I began feeling that I'm moving into a new era after grief. Not completely after, but significantly after grief. And I thought, in order for me to write 80 to 90,000 words, I must have a substantial time capsule in order to fill those pages, and not babble on just to fill the pages, but have substantial things to say and write about. So the commitment and the discipline starts. Commitment and discipline is a prerequisite for writing, and you're in it for the long haul. If you're writing 80 to 90,000 words, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a couple of months, not a couple, but quite a number of months. Decide on a word count per day. The recommendation out there is 800 to 1,000 words per day. Decide how many days per week do you want to write those 800 to 1,000 words. Plan breaks. Plan catch-up time. If you didn't reach your word count target, when are you going to catch up and finish your first draft? I decided to draw a line for my first draft. When I reached 83,000 words, I realized that I've only completed the first year after Russell's passing of my progress with mourning and grief. And I would do the following 4 years no justice by summarizing it in 7,000 words. And so that is how the One Writing Project developed into 2 books. So I called the first book Without You, about the first year of grief and loss, and followed that up with Still Love Remains, which was the following 4 years. And because it's 2 books, I had to go through that whole process of decision making. I can't just continue in the same way that I have done the first book, the same decisions about who I address and how I address it. And I made some changes. And while Without You was a one-way conversation from me to Russell, the second book was letters that I have written to him from time to time, and I dated those letters, and each letter with a specific date was a different chapter. And so that was the years, that was the part 4 that I wanted to include in the first writing project. Was part 4 became a second book. And I realized that I had very much to say. And I realized that writing unleashed so much memory, that so much detail that I didn't expect to be writing about came through in my writing project. And embarking on the second book, also it will be less words than the first. And it wasn't. It was even more. So go with the process, plan your writing project, but be aware that when you are in the process, things can change, and then you can change your plans. So after the first draft, take a break. Take a break of about a month. Just walk away from your writing program. Try not to think about it, and then return a month later, a month or so later. Then the rewriting comes, the do again comes, the comes. Revisit, revise, rethink, restructure, rewrite. The phase. Go through the entire book and see what it is that you would like to improve. After you've done that, it might be once, it might be twice, it might even be 3 times or more. You will know when you are satisfied with your draft. Then self-edit. Start from word 1 to word last and try and improve language usage, paragraphing, and all of that. See that your structure makes sense and that you are consistent in the ways in which you have done things. That is when you have a manuscript. If you are satisfied, then plan the next steps. You've been listening to my writing process on my podcast, On a Way with Beryl Botman. Walk tall. Tell it all. You've been listening to On a Way with Beryl Botman. You can purchase my books online on Amazon, Take-A-Lot, and at bookstores like Exclusive Books, Bargain Books, Independent Bookstores, and Barnes & Noble internationally. To connect with me, please follow me on Facebook to learn more about my book launches and talks. You can write to me at beryl.botman60@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.